Welcome back to my channel, and today's video was not even supposed to be the video that it is. I literally was working on my video for 3 days, guys, editing, and I accidentally deleted it. I don't know how to get it back. I was trying to clear up storage and I don't know what I did. But anyways, everything happens for a reason, and it does make more sense for me to do today's video instead of the one I was gonna do. Today's the 31st and tomorrow is the 1st. So many people around the world are, celebrating what they think is the new year, and they're already starting outside of my apartment. And don't be afraid when you get into this journey and you start getting into this stuff to be like, oh, I don't celebrate and that doesn't align with me, right? It's been 3 years since I've celebrated holidays or even just the new year on January 1st. I haven't celebrated it like that in 3 years, and I celebrate the Persian New Year, which is in March 21st, and it's called Nowruz, and Nowruz just means new day. And maybe I shouldn't say that I celebrate Nowruz. I don't really do all the traditions and the things that they do, like setting out the things on the table, etc. But I do align with the date and the new day thing. And yeah, so I'm so excited to get into the history of how we just went from calendar to calendar, the different reforms that took place. And hopefully by the end of this video, you can decide when you think the new year is. Okay, so just to start off, let's get into a little bit of astrology. So Aries is the first house, and it ends with Pisces, the 12th house. Okay, the 12 zodiacs. And like I said, the Bible teaches the sun's path through the zodiacs, as above, so below. It is also within us as well. And Aries starts on March 21st, right? It is the time of new beginnings, spring. And, back in the old days, they very much celebrated this as the new year, okay? So in the early times, the Mesopotamia, the Babylonians, they would celebrate for 11 days in spring. And then, like I said, Nowruz in Iran, they would celebrate for 13 days, just the new beginnings. And they looked at it as they were super happy for spring to come back around, right? They knew that winter was a time of death and rebirth, not just physically in nature, but also internally, right? It's not a time to start new projects, right? That's why a lot of people fail at these, what do you call them? The things that you start at New Year's resolutions. And because it's not a time to start new things, you're still needing to go within, still purging out old things, so that in spring, when the flowers start to bloom and life starts to come back and it starts to get warm out, then you can start your new projects, right? Being in tune with nature is really key. And like I said before, I feel like everything we've been told is just misconstrued and not what it is. It take us far away from who we truly are and to get us out of touch with nature. Okay, so yeah, so even the Romans, they celebrated spring and the new year on the first day of spring, and that all shifted, and we're going to get into just the very first calendar. So back in the day, there was 3 ways that they really were able to keep track of time and these calendars. So you had the lunar cycles that they used, you had the solar cycles, and you had the sidereal. Okay, so lunar was just them using the moon cycles. We got month from moon. Then solar obviously is the sun, and then sidereal is from the stars. So sidereal just means star, and even old philosophers like Homer were using the sidereal, right, through his teachings like the Odyssey, his books. You can see that he was very much aligned with just paying attention to the stars. And so many astronomers and astrologists back then, and philosophers, it's in their work if you know how to decode it and get deep. One of the earliest ways that they were able to just keep track of time, and kind of the earliest calendar, if you want to say that, is they would have these bones and they would put markings in them, and they were using the lunar cycle. So they would look at the new moon and pay attention to the moon cycles. And another way in Egypt is they had these things called nilometers, which is super cool to me. So in the Nile River, they would use these, and they would be able to track the seasons and the time of year by the different floods and, just the different, if it was raised, if it was lower. They were using the Nile River. And those are two of the earliest ways that they were kind of keeping track of time, using nature, right? Using what was around them. And then you had where they built the Stonehenge, and they were keeping track of the year by tracking the sun's path, and when it came back to that certain spot, that same spot, they knew that a year had passed. Then you had people using the sidereal, right? This is when astronomers, and they started to just look up, like I said, Homer and so many people were using the stars, and they believed that, you know, the stars were in the same positions and that they showed the same things, and that they could, when certain stars went around, they knew that that was a certain season, and etc. When we got to the Roman time, right, which is what I call the the New World Order, which when everything changed, I feel like they had a big, huge group of people that wanted to get rid of so much information. So you had the first king of Rome called Romulus. And he was addicted to the number 10. Okay, so he had 10 senates, 10 this, 10 this, 10 this. And he wanted to make a calendar with 10 months. So he started out by naming them after the Roman gods. And then when he ran out of gods, he started to use numbers. So like sextilis. I'm going to put the list up there for every person I talk about, or every calendar I talk about. But so he was obsessed with number 10. So once we had the 10 months, there were 61 days left over. And they basically looked at them like they were unlucky numbers, or I'm not sure why, but they just basically dismissed them. Okay. So after the first king, you had the second king named King Numa, and he made the next calendar called the Numa calendar. And he looked at odd numbers as unlucky. I don't know what was their obsession, right? Numerology, probably. They knew all this stuff. So he wanted to add 2 more months to the calendar to make it 12 instead of 10. Okay, so they reduced the days of the month from 30 to 29 and added 2 months. And they added a month called Mercedonius, which they did not make it a month that stayed there all the time. They pretty much just implemented it whenever they wanted to. And this is when you had high priests, who were the ones who basically told everybody when special days were, or right, the word Mercedonius comes from the word merce, which means paid. And this is when they were getting paid, right? Soldiers, they would get paid once a year, which was during Mercedonius month. This is when just everyone was getting paid, and when they would tax people, and you didn't have a printing press or anything like that, so people didn't have their own calendars to look at. People weren't keeping up with this stuff like we are today. It's hard to think about and to think, but so they would almost use this to their advantage, right? So sometimes they would not even implement Mercedonius because they had people that were political, right? They didn't want certain people to come out of office yet, or they wanted to tax the people more, or they didn't want to pay soldiers. So they would just skip Mercedonius and they wouldn't even use it. So this really got chaotic, right? And messed everything up. So during this time, Julius Caesar was the next one up, and he decided to make his new calendar. And what he did was he wanted it to happen fast. So in 1 year, they had 465 days that he was like, let's just fix it quickly. And then this pretty much fixed everything and got everything back in alignment. They basically took away Mercedonius, and they introduced the leap year every 4 years. And the Senate and the high priest was so happy that he got everything back in alignment. That is where we get the month July from. They decided to change, I think it was Sextilius at this time, I'm not even sure, and they changed it from that to July, and it was named after Julius. Okay, so after Julius Caesar, he actually died 2 years later, and the people were like, oh, this is because he was messing with God's work, and I don't know, they just assumed that he died because he remade the calendar, and I don't know. Okay, so then after that, you had Augustus, who decided to fix the calendar. Once again, it was off. And this is when math really started to become popular, and they were able to implement just different ways of calculating and doing things. So Augustus decided to fix it again, but he decided to do it over 16 years instead of in 1 year like previously. So over 16 years, they were able to get it back in alignment. And, you know, once again, they were so happy. They ended up naming August after Augustus. And August actually had less days than July, but they were like, there's no way you can have less days than Julius. So they added more days in August, which is crazy that they were like that kind of petty. But anyways, during this time you had Constantine, and I have a video talking about how Christianity became the main religion and how Constantine, he was really a big guy during the Roman period time, if you ask me. He was really changing up all kinds of things. And so he's the one who introduced the 7-day week. And you have to remember, they stole all this from previous people. Okay, that's subjective, but they did. So he wanted to introduce a holy day, which was Sunday. Okay, this is when Christianity started to become a thing. And so he introduced the 7-day week. And before in Babylonian, they actually also had a 7-day week, but they used the planets. So they called the planets the 7 wonders, and they included the sun and the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, right? The 7 luminary planets that I talk about in my other videos. And that is where we get our 7 days of the week. That is where we get our 7 metals. That is where we get our 7 chakras. That is where we get do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. So many things align with 7, right? Because as above, so below. Okay, but I'm getting into something else, so I'm sorry. But so he introduced a 7-day week and Sunday as the holy day. My video stopped, so I have to redo a little bit of that, but that's okay. So the Council of Nicaea, which was this Christian council, and you have to remember, during this time, Christianity was not the central religion. It got pushed throughout Rome and, throughout Europe and all over the place. And I have a video on my page that goes into this. But anyways, the Council of Nicaea wanted to come up with these set dates for Christian religion, so Easter, Christmas, etc. So for Easter, they all decided on it being the first Sunday after the first new moon in April. But the problem with that is that, in different parts of the world, it was falling on a different day. Every single year, it was falling on a different day. And after this, you had what they called the Dark Ages. And this is when science started to get pushed out, and you had people like Dennis the Small and so many people who really started to pay attention, monks who started to pay attention to time, right? And people like in the Catholic religion, they were realizing that they were fasting at the wrong times because, right, they fasted during certain days and holidays, and they really wanted to know a set date. So they ended up making the spring equinox on March 21st. And that is how the spring equinox got its date. During this time, you had Pope Gregory, and he made the Gregorian calendar, which is the calendar we still use to this day. And during 1502 through 1585, he was ruling. And in 1582, I'm pretty sure, he made the Gregorian calendar the main calendar and implemented it into the church. So all he did basically was implement a new leap year system, and it was just introducing a day every 4 years instead of a whole month. And during this time, the Catholic Church took on this Gregorian calendar, and the South really took this on. But the North and the UK, they were not down for this. They were like, no, this doesn't align with what we believe and what we've always done. And so they didn't even take it on until 1752, which was hundreds of years later. And, they even had to fix the calendar by 11 days instead of 10, like Pope Gregory did, because that's just how much time has passed by. So, I think it's really important. That's really kind of all the information I have. I do have stuff on how the days just came about, which was, in the early Egyptian times, they had 10 hours in a day, and they added 2, which they called the night and the morning light or something like that. And they had 12 hours. So during the Greek period, when you had the astronomers who started to become popular, they also too wanted to be able to basically time the night just like they were the day. So they just added 12 more hours so that they can keep track of the stars and all this. If you're interested and want to get into just some more on this, the more kind of conspiracy side of it, Santos Bonacci, he is the first person I heard even talk about how, the new year is in March and brought it with the zodiacs. And he has so much work, and has done years of research, and he really took me from here to here. But he talks about how every 15 degrees, that is where we get a new hour, and that's the sun's path through the skies. And that's where we get our 24 hours as the sun's path. I really don't have much more to say on this. I really just wanted to kind of talk about the history and how we went from calendar to calendar. And, hopefully by the end of this video, you've learned something and you can make your own decision on when you think the new year is, not just because we've been told this our whole life. And I do get the history of it and how things were off and how they wanted to get it back in alignment. I just don't understand why they had to make January the new year versus March, right? You can still have fixed everything and made March the 1st and it goes along with the seasons, right? Why are we celebrating New Year in the middle of the winter? Everything else in nature blooms during the spring. But if you're celebrating the New Year during this time, this video is not to try to look down on or say anything negative about it. I hope that you have the best year ever. And, although I don't celebrate till March, this is my year. I'm claiming it. I'm speaking into existence. And I hope the same for you. So, I hope you guys have a great week. And if you're not already, follow my TikTok, @AshleyEckerly_. I'm not really on the other social medias. I do post on Instagram, but just to promote my podcast.